Thank you for coming by for a brand new Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. This past full build Friday, I put together a character from Zenless Zone Zero, and completely coincidentally, I have a monster to present from it as well, the champion of the Exaltus, the Flame Cantor. These are a newer sort of enemy introduced with the Season 2 update, and one of the beefier elite types of enemies. Flame Cantors are former humans, or one of the other races of ZZZ, that have risen through the ranks of the Exaltus. Either as part of attaining their high rank, or after securing it, they have taken on etheric corruption, though they still at least appear mostly human, unlike the variety of corrupted bandits who are clearly more monstrous. This alludes to the Flame Cantor's control over the corruption and ether in general, which we'll also see plenty of as we start digging into its features. I did lean into the Flame Cantor's foul faith a little bit and even considered building it more like a champion, but ended up not quite going that far. I based its level of 9 off of its stats being slightly better than that of the Zenless Zone Zero Goblin, as well as its ability to call Huskrons into the fight. It may have once been human, but the only reflection of that left is the humanoid trait that it retains. Beyond that, its corruption has left it as an aberration and mutant, only enhancing the menace and mayhem it might make. Looking to the numbers for the Flame Cantor, its religious leaning doesn't stop it from being a brutish sort of combatant. It leads with a high strength, which it uses to wield its weapon, some sort of axe hammer thing, to devastating effect. Its constitution and charisma are both at a moderate value, the latter of which is meant to be a direct reference to the fact that champions use charisma as their primary casting stat. Its dexterity and wisdom are low, as they're bulky boys who obviously fell victim to a cult, which doesn't give me a good estimation of their wisdom. I then have their intelligence being even lower as a sort of sign of their corruption starting to sap their mind. So wrapped up in their devotion, they have a terrible perception score as well, but their mutation has left them with low light vision. So they have that going for them at least. That brings us to skills, which follow its ability scores a bit, starting with a high athletics. This might allow it to knock people around, but it doesn't actually come up too much in its kit. However, with it being a humanoid, it's completely fair to have it putting enough thought into using tactics and maneuvers that take advantage of it. It also uses a moderate intimidation and religion, as even its faith is frightening. However, I've been designing the ethereals of ZZZ as aberration, so occultism, even at a low value, makes sense for me to include. It helps it define and recall knowledge about some of the creatures that its worship is centered around. This fire-flinging fanatic features a merely moderate armor class, which is a little bit lower than what I usually like to build monsters with. It is compensated with a high pool of hit points, but it's worth keeping in mind that it has some weaknesses and resistances based on being an organic enemy within Zenless Zone Zero. This leads to a weakness to fire damage, but a resistance to electricity damage, which are at a moderate value for this creature's level. That leaves only the saving throws to discuss here, which follow a pretty simple setup. As a bit of a physical beast, its fortitude obviously takes the lead here with a high value, which is followed by a moderate will save that is inspired by its fanatical devotion to its cause, even if its wisdom is a little bit on the lower side of things. It does actually have a low reflex save based on its low dexterity, and it's fun to mix it up a bit for me. I feel like I do too many monsters that just have a high fortitude, moderate reflex, and a low will, and this just changes that all up a tiny bit. When it comes to the offenses of the Flame Cantor, there's only a single attack to consider, the one that it makes with its great axe that I've chosen to represent its weapon. Its attack bonus is merely moderate, but the weapon does have the sweep trait, which almost serves as a discount agile trait. However, the damage of the axe very easily gets up to extreme damage, befitting the brute design that I was leaning into for this manic monster. Now before we start looking at its abilities, an important aspect of the Flame Cantor are its devotion spells. I went for the focus spells from the fire and decay domains inspired by its own thematics, and then gave them a moderate DC and attack bonus. Its rank of spells have it dealing pretty solid damage, but it also just makes use of their range and persistent effects to ensure that they are kept relevant. With such spells spoiled, let's see some of its abilities. The first thing I want to discuss is something that might be considered a little standard, a little banal, but is very useful: swipe.
Swiper, no swiping!
This is inspired by the barbarian/fighter feat of the same name, and functions exactly like it with a single caveat. The Flame Cantor's reach gives it a little bit of leeway, so that it can swing wide enough to hit creatures up to 15 feet away from each other. This is purely mechanical. This is something I've observed from all the games I've played. While it isn't too unusual for monsters to group up for something like this, getting PCs to do so is nigh impossible. So I am simply trying to ensure that it has the opportunity to use this attack. However, after that we do get into some slightly more unique abilities. Perhaps the most central of these is Corruption Crash. This is another 2-action ability to make a single strike. However, as long as the Flame Cantor doesn't critically fail this strike, we get the main benefit of this effect: the creation of a miasma pool. This pool drains the life of creatures that start their turn within it, based on a moderate DC Fortitude save. While miasma merely deals a big burst of damage after building up in ZZZ, I sought to represent it through the drain condition, as that gives me more opportunities to play around with it. My good buddy Blue had asked me if the intent was to have this be an emanation that moves with a targeted creature, but I hopefully made it clear enough that that is not the case here. Following on from that, the Flame Cantor does have a crazy sort of dash attack that I didn't notice until I saw it in tests against a creature. I chose to represent this with Toxic Takeoff, an ability akin to the Pounce action, except this one costs a focus point to use. It does so because the Flame Cantor leaves behind a field of miasma in each square it leaves, which I specified because I didn't want the Flame Cantor getting caught in its own miasma. Now these miasmic pools have a few things of note about them. Firstly, the Flame Cantor can use them to call forth Huskrons, as we see in the ability that I literally named Call Huskrons. This is 3 actions and has a frequency limit of once per hour, but is based on the Serpent Folk Bone Prophet, even in regards to the level discrepancy and number of creatures called forth. I stole the wording of it fairly directly with a few modifications to better suit the circumstances of the Flame Cantor. I do wonder if I shouldn't have given this a focus point cost, but I think the per hour frequency is enough of a limitation on it. The other benefit of these pools is getting creatures drained. As soon as a creature becomes at least drained 1 from this, or potentially other effects, the Flame Cantor can pray for their downfall through miasmic prayer.
I want you to kill Peter Parker.
I mentioned earlier that players need to fail that moderate save against the Flame Cantor's miasma pools to begin with, but after they do, it can force this high DC save upon them with the intent of draining them further. However, one thing of note, I did deliberately make this a will save, so it's not this recursive loop of draining and then targeting their lower save each time he does it. However, if the Flame Cantor succeeds on this or its Corruption Crash, and leaves a target drained, or increases the target's drained, it can trigger its Inflamed Fervor. I've talked plenty about my love for unique reactions, and this is one of them. It allows the Flame Cantor to celebrate the spread of its gruesome gospel, express through the Cantor getting a focus point or briefly becoming quickened. This allows it to play a bit more freely with its focus points, which is why I was fine using it as a cost for Toxic Takeoff, or it also helps it fill out its turn among those 2 and 3 action effects that it has. We're about done exalting this corrupted Cantor, so let's take a look at what we've got. This flame-flinging fanatic fills the field with fetid fluids that feast on the force of fools found in their foul flow. It follows such feats with a ferocious frenzy as it fells foes in a fearsome flourish. I think the Flame Cantor serves best as a sort of boss monster. If you look at throwing it up against on-level enemies or higher, its Call Huskrons quickly becomes much less useful, and may even be something that you want to drop or swap out for a different ability. It has a number of ways of controlling the battlefield, but it has to be careful with the miasmic pools that it spreads, because I didn't design it to be immune to them. It just felt more fun for me for it having to play around them, or accept the deeper corruption that it is trying to spread. Let me know what you think of this creature and what other sorts of monsters you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, be sure to leave a like and then subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.